Morla David, Adonai mi yagor ba'olecha, yishkon ba'ar kodshecha, holef hamim, v'kol tzedek v'dover emet bilbavo. V'ragala l'shano lo asa l'reyehu ra'ah, v'terpa lo nasal krobo. Yished ve'inav v'yishpa lo harav le'yamir, asol lo nasan b'neshech, v'shofar al nasi lo lachas, v'ke'ele lo yimot le'olam. We've gathered here today to show kavod achron to Rabbi Marc Messing, Rabbi Mordechai Herschel, and Shmuel David. I'd like to ask his grandson, Shlomo Davidovich, to please begin with the parak of Tehillim.
Thank you for this amount of
Currently, in the month of Nisan, formal Hasidim, formal eulogies are not given, but I'd like to ask Rabbi David Heber, the Rav of Kal Abbas Yisrael Tzemach Tzedek, to please share some divrei zikaron.
Yesterday was the 10th of Nisan, the day that we call Shabbos HaGadol really occurred on this day. As the Torah says, "Ba'asol HaChodesh Hazeh," on the 10th day you will take a set, Klal Yisrael, and a great nace occurred. That despite being the Avodah Zarah of the Mitzrayim, the idolatry of the Egyptians, but still Klal Yisrael was able to take this as begin the process of the Korban Pesach. And it was a Shabbos that we commemorated every Shabbos HaGadol, as the Shulchan Aruch tells us. Shabbos Shalifnei HaPesach, current Shabbos HaGadol, the Nehanetz. It was a great miracle that occurred, the beginning of the Geula, the beginning of the redemption of Klal Yisrael. So the famous question which is asked is it occurred yesterday on the 10th of Nisan, the date of the Tzira of Rabbi Marc Messing, Olav Shalom. Why don't we commemorate this great miracle on the actual day? We always commemorate on the days. We don't commemorate on the days of the week. So why do we pick the day of the week? The Magen Avraham explains because V'nei Shekavu Baitinus Shapesa Miriam, because really it's a sad day. It's the day that Miriam Hanaviyah passed away, and therefore we can't mix the bitterness of the passing of Miriam, where some people even have a custom to fast, with such a great simcha, so they pick Shabbos instead. The Taz gives a different answer. The Taz says, Nasa Oynes, Hayardain, that at the end it was actually a happy day that we will read about in Haftarah on this coming Sunday morning, where Klal Yisrael went into Eretz Yisrael on this day, and therefore it's a simcha day, and therefore if we celebrate this day, because you see us Mitzrayim, people will think that we're really celebrating it because it's the day we went into Eretz Yisrael, it'll lose its chivas. People won't remember the Nes of Mitzrayim, and therefore they pick Shabbos, so it would be a designated day. The Nifter possessed the miles of each of these events. Miriam Hanaviyah was a very insightful person. Miriam Hanaviyah gave advice to her parents, which ultimately led to the birth of Moshe Rabbeinu, the Mashiach Shal Yisrael, the one that took us out of Mitzrayim. And our Rabbi Shal Yisrael, it was all because of her advice. It was all because of her insightfulness, her understanding, her maiden davar mitayt davar, her ability to apply what she knew with actually apply to reality, to be able to capitalize on the situation based on her great knowledge. And this was Marc with his Abbas HaTorah and his Hasmada and his Yediyas, always applying even in his English classes. He was able to apply Torah so that the Talmidim would understand better everything, the world around us, because of that Mavid Davar B'Tayt Davar. Klal Yisrael crossed the Eretz Yisrael on this day. The Abbas of Yisrael is going to be buried in Eretz Yisrael. And the transition in history was this day. So we went from all of the Shibud, all the Mitzrayim, the Midbar, all the difficult days into the great Eretz Yisrael. It was a great transitional day in the history of Klal Yisrael, the ramifications of which are felt until this day. So too, Marc understood history. He was able to plug in history to modern events. And finally, Miriam and Avia and Klal Yisrael, on this day, the day that Klal Yisrael went ahead and took the set, they were tremendously Meiser Nefesh, going ahead right in front of the Mitzrayim to listen to the will of the Rebbeinu Shalom, to do what's right because it was right, despite the fact that it required tremendous Mesiras Nefesh. So too, Marc, together with his Rebbetzin, Eve, and Stark, together they were Meiser Nefesh tremendously. And throughout their whole life, Meiser Nefesh for Yiddishkeit, Meiser Nefesh for Achnas Zorchim, time, effort, understanding the needs of people sometimes before they even understood what they needed. Achnas Zorchim is legendary in their home, and despite Marc's health difficulties, but he still pushed himself to learn, to teach. He attended a Shira Mine for many years, always asking questions, always knowing exactly what to ask and what to learn and what to know. This was his life. And this day that he passed away symbolizes his entire life. It's most true for Achaim.
His son Rabbi.
So last night, on mine, 4:45 in the morning, when I finally had some time to sit and write down some of my thoughts, I was trying to figure out how to express some of the things that I wanted to say, some of the things that the family wanted to say. And I realized that I had an incredible resource available to me to help guide me and help me through this. You know, at a time like this, normally my instinct would be to go to my father and ask him, get his thoughts. After my dad got his diagnosis in early September, his brother Jeff sat down with him for hours and recorded hours and hours of discussions about the family, about life, about his ideas, his thoughts, on all kinds of different topics. And this morning, I was able to sit and listen to his voice and have him tell me some of the things that I was trying to say and help me formulate the thoughts. And he addressed some of the things that were important to him and some of the things that he wanted to make sure that both our family and his friends knew and understood. Abba said that the most important thing that he wanted to be remembered for was that he tried to have a positive effect on every single person who came in contact with him. In effect, that was individualized, that was geared towards each person exactly what they needed. And he was an expert in doing that. I think from the crowd that's here today, it's self-evident. His family, his friends, his colleagues, his co-workers, his campers from Chaverim, even though Chaverim has been closed for over 20 years and now has been reignited with his help. And especially his students. Every single one has a different story about how he impacted them and how he helped them grow in a positive manner. A lot of people don't know this, but my dad was actually born in New York. Everyone knows he was from Wilmington, but he was actually born in New York. My grandparents wanted to raise a family somewhere that they could have a house, somewhere that they could have a lawn, and they moved to Wilmington. He was a year and a half old, and then his brother Jeff, sister Lisa, and brother Scott grew up in Wilmington, Delaware. And I think amongst the many strong beliefs that my grandparents passed on to him, one of the ones that he held in the highest import was the value of family. And the value of doing whatever was needed to make sure that his family would be happy. When Jeff asked him what he felt his most important accomplishment was, he didn't even hesitate. He said, my family. Over the last few months, we got to hear a lot more about the family and the history, and especially through the assistance of the jar of memories that Lisa sent to him, that we would read together with him when he was able to read, and then we'd read it to him, and he would nod along. He loved to talk about his family. He loved to hear the stories about them. He loved to tell the stories about them. He loved watching the videos that the family would send. He wasn't necessarily able to type or respond, but he'd watch the videos of the triplets playing. He would watch Lila performing. He got such pride from every moment. He didn't grow up religious, but his family was traditional, and he was taught at a young age the importance of belief. As he grew older, he started to examine his role in the world and developed a strong belief in Judaism and an understanding of Hashem. His relationship with God changed over the years. He was always learning and examining his faith and encouraging others to do the same. He wanted everyone to see the unique challenges that they face in life as opportunities to learn and grow from. And that, when he was in the hospital in October and my family was able to visit, that is the main thing that he said to my kids of what he wanted them to understand. Every single person is unique. Every single person has their own challenges. But he encouraged them to find their own path in the world. And even if it wasn't the same one that he took himself and that he necessarily would have picked, he felt it was important for them to make their own decisions and figure out what was important to them. He loved learning. He loved chasing down the meaning of things. He was the ultimate educator and the consumer of knowledge at the same time. From his various degrees to his reading of both secular and Judaic writings, he wanted to understand more, and he tried to impart that wisdom to all of us as well. He would send books to his grandchildren in Cleveland, and he would always be excited to discuss them with them. He would read together with the grandchildren and talk to each one on the level that they were on at whatever age they were at. He didn't like to talk about himself. He didn't like to talk about his accomplishments, which might have been the reason why one of his grandchildren didn't realize that he was an attorney. They thought he was a teacher. They never knew until about a year ago. Just like his father, he had an incredible sense of humor. And it shined through even sometimes when it might not have been the best time, the time that you expected it. A few days ago, Shimmy and I were struggling to move him because he was unable to move from his wheelchair into the bed. And anyone who knows him knows he was a big guy. And Shimmy and I were both standing there trying to get him up. And I said, Abba, give me a hand. And he looked at me and he said, he could barely do it. But that was his sense of humor coming through. He couldn't speak. He could barely lift his hands, but it was still there. He had a love for music that he also got from his father. And that was one of the things that kept him relaxed over the last few days. You know, he faced a lot of different health issues, not just recently, but over the course of his life. He never said, woe is me. When people would call him, he would quickly turn the conversation around. He would say, how are you? What did you learn today? What can I help you with? The last 6 months were challenging, and being diagnosed with a terminal illness the same week that he was sitting Shiva for his mother, it made it even more challenging. And one might think that that would challenge his faith in Hashem. But when we were talking about what the treatment plan would be, he was adamant that anything that would give him an extra minute, 1 extra minute, no matter how much it hurt him, 1 extra minute to think about Avos Hashem, to think about Avos Yisrael, to think about his family, it was worth it. I think that he obviously was not happy with what came through. But I think the most upsetting thing to him was not the fact that he was nearing the end, the fact that he didn't have the opportunity to help more people for a longer amount of time. We want to make sure that we thank the various different organizations, the medical staff, the care teams, and all of the people that provided overwhelming support to him, to us, to the family, his incredible friends who provided him with spiritual, emotional, and physical support that he needed through this time and through the last 20-something years. A very special thank you on behalf of the family to Bais Yaakov for allowing us to be here today and giving us the opportunity to have more people to give him kavod for one last time. He loved Broadway musicals. And the opportunity to sit and watch one last time. Wow. Ever since Dina, Shimmy, and I can remember, Abba always said that he had a desire to be buried in Eretz Yisrael. His love of the land of Israel was so strong. Every opportunity that he had to go and visit, he did it with meticulous planning, like he did everything. He looked exactly, he knew what he wanted to go visit, what he wanted to see while he was there. He was so incredibly proud of me when I was able to make Aliyah with my family, and I'm eternally thankful that I'm able to escort him to Eretz Yisrael on the final trip. On behalf of the entire family, I want to say thank you for everything that you did for us, everything that you provided us, and we hope that we continue to make you proud.
His son-in-law, Rabbi Rafi Davidovich.
One of the first memories that stands out for me of Abba was actually after we got married, even though I had known him for a few months already. And we had a Shabbat Brachos that Friday night at the Frolux. And Dina was the only one at the Shabbat Brachos who knew me, which is fairly normal, standard. And all the friends who had put the Shabbat Brachos together were singing the praises of the Messings. Those who knew Dina say something about Dina, about Abba and Ima. And sort of as the evening was winding down, Abba said that he wanted to speak as well. I don't know if he was officially on the roster, but he had said that he wanted to speak. And then I remember he said, thank you everybody for coming and thank you to all the hosts. But I think you should get to know Rabbi. And he started to speak for however long, just telling all the wonderful things about me. He says he's here too. You should get to know him as well. I mean, I've been at Shabbat Brachos where people have spoken, meaning my own Shabbat Brachos, and they didn't know my name. Dina and the Chassan, and that was fine. They didn't mind at all. Family, I'm very proud to have become a part of. But the fact that Abba thought of that, they said, Rafi's probably maybe a little out of place. He doesn't really know anyone here today. And yet that stood out. And I think about that all the time because it's the perfect prototype story of something that I witnessed him doing over and over and over again over the course of the last 22 years. We had Abba and Ima for our Siddharim for the last approximately 20 years. And Dina reminded me yesterday about how wherever he happened to sit at our Siddharim, which had a considerable amount of people, it wasn't just that, okay, he was at his daughter's home with his grandchildren. If he was sitting next to a guest and sometimes at a large Seder, some of the guests end up getting ignored or forgotten a little bit. He would make a point of, as Rocky said, finding out what their particular milos were, what values they had. If there were children there, he made the children feel like $1 million. If there were adults there who had any sort of difficulties in their lives, he made a point of making them feel better. And this happened, whoever it was. We had different guests year to year, and yet it was the same thing at every Pesach. I think very much of a line in the Gemara that talks about Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva is the prototype of an attitude that the Gemara describes as "B'boker zera zarecha, v'erev al panach yodecha," which means if you have children when you're young, you should still have children and students when you're older. You shouldn't just stop what you're doing at the beginning at the end. And all of us saw this. The pride that he took in that first generation of his family. He told me he had even been a Hebrew teacher before he got married, a Hebrew school teacher in New York while he was in Yeshiva. And the pride that he took, that Rabbi mentioned, I saw this all the time, where the students that went beyond just that first generation, meaning of his children, and then the generation of the students or the campers. They were campers, but to him they were students at Camp Chaverim. The amount of pride that he took in knowing where a particular camp or Camp Haverim was and what they were doing and how they had started a family was something that was a tremendous source of pride to him. And that pride continued into this second generation, as Rabbi mentioned, of Camp Haverim. And the pride that he took in his curriculum that he developed for Ner Yisrael when he was an English teacher there continued on for another generation, where he was so proud of what he was able to do and connections that he was able to make with the students at Storas Chaim, knowing that he could continue, that just because he did it for one generation didn't mean that he couldn't do it even better with even more practice and more expertise in singling out a student's abilities and skills and intelligence and emotional intelligence and maximizing to guide them and to coach them into careers and building families. And he would, even though Rocky said he didn't talk about himself, but this wasn't talking about himself. This was talking about the dozens and hundreds of students that he impacted. People who knew him knew almost first before they knew anything about him. They might not have known that he was an attorney. They might not have known about his degrees, but they knew about Camp Haverim. They knew, those who got to know him even better, knew how much he loved his children, how much he adored his grandchildren. Shalva had to write an essay when she was like in third grade about someone who has had a huge impact on her life. And it could have been anyone, but she chose Zadie, because when we moved to Cleveland, and then soon after we had a new baby boy born, and there was a challenge, and we were hardly at home because we were in the hospital all the time. Zadie started to read to Shalva every single day. Read through this whole Avner Gold series, which I think by the time they were done reading it, had approximately 75 to 80 books. Just reading one after another, night after night after night. Developing this relationship with her. What he started way back when, which he was so proud of the people that he got to meet. This is something that also stood out very much with me, at least. Was that people have various influences in their lives. This is obvious. Find yourself a teacher, acquire for yourself a friend. Yet Abba did this to the max, so that I got to know some of his Rabbein that he was so proud to have learned under. He several times mentioned, besides for those who guided him in his youth, like the learners, there's Rabbi Willig, the Rabbein when he came to Ner Yisrael briefly, the friends that he had. That's something that I envy to this day. I could go on for a very long time, but I'm just afraid I would forget certain names. But the friendships that not only that he valued, but I was able to witness over the years how much they valued him. It was shocking. Shocking and beautiful. I feel a sense of obligation because, of course, that's what Pesach is all about, is somehow conveying what it is that you took from an earlier generation and somehow passing it on to the generations that follow. To figure out a way to do that for myself, that we can do that for our family. That not just a reverence, but as Rafi said, that ahava, that love, that emunah, that faith that he had, and to pass that on with a joy, with a wicked sense of humor, with a tremendous amount of love. And if we can figure out how to do that, how to make sure, as Rafi said, that every interaction ends up with a positive memory for the people you have interacted with, then Abba will continue to be a teacher, not only for those two full generations that he was a teacher, to so many hundreds of people with their families now that number in the thousands. But we can now continue that on for another generation or two or three at the ESQ.
Because it is Kodesh Nisan, we will not be saying the Talmale, instead, capital Tet Zion. Talmud David, Shomer El, Kifasiti Ba, Marc, Levaya, Ata, Tovasi Bala Lecha. Mishashima Shervar Tema, Badirei, Kofet Shibam, Yeduat, Vasam, Acher Maharu, Balasif, Niskehem Idam, Balasash, Nasam, Al Sasai. Adonai Nasaki Lefasia Tatomit Barali Havali Nafuri Bani Yimim Af Nachalas Shatra Alai Avarekas Adonai Asher Yatani Af Leros Yisruni Kil Yosai Shibiti Adonai Lenegdi Samid Kimi Nini Balamot Nafin Samach Lidi Anagel Tvodi Af Tishari Yishkon Ladata Kilosa Azod Nafki Lishol Esikim Chatzit Kalil Shachas Todieni Orachayim Sovas Makotas Panecha Mimos Bimin Panecha. The Kura will be tomorrow on Thursday in Eretz Yisrael at approximately 10:30 a.m. at Eretz Hakayim in Beit Shemesh. The Shiva will begin today at 6307 Pimlico Road through Thursday after Mincha Marav. The davening schedule will be as follows. Chakras tomorrow at 8 a.m. Mincha Marav tonight and tomorrow at 5:55 p.m. Shiva will continue in Cleveland on Friday 9 to 2 and in Ra'anana from tomorrow after the Kura until Friday at 2. I would like to now call up the pallbearers. When you hear your name, please come up to the front. Peter Weissman, Myron Frolis, Dov Perlmutter, Shlomi Winstock, Yecheska Leiter, Shlomo Davidovich, Avi Levin, Bill Goldberg, Larry Zipper, Judah Messing, and Murray Jacobson. The family requests the donations made in Rabbi Messing's memory to Yeshiva's Torah Chaim.
Hello.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much. Record high, 365 people. 365.
Nina? Can you please come here a minute?
Thank you very much. Yeah.